Hey guys, it's the social side. The revitalization of It's Consulting Time is back, and we're taking it back to the basics. That's B2TB. This curriculum-based season will shine a light on public education surrounding civics, community organizing, and trending topics. Guys, It's Consulting Time back to the basics is supporting the transformation of cultures and subcultures while building self-sufficiency and generating collective impact. Remember, purpose over popularity is always and will always be our motto. Tune in to It's Consulting Time back to the basics every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can even catch a few clips on Instagram. It's Consulting Time back to the basics with your girl Lily Mae. See you there. Hey guys, it's the social side. The revitalization of It's Consulting Time is back, and we're taking it back to the basics. That's B2TB. This curriculum-based season will shine a light on public education surrounding civics, community organizing, and trending topics. Guys, It's Consulting Time back to the basics is supporting the transformation of cultures and subcultures while building self-sufficiency and generating collective impact. Remember, purpose over popularity is always and will always be our motto. Tune in to It's Consulting Time back to the basics every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can even catch a few clips on Instagram. It's Consulting Time back to the basics with your girl Lily Mae. See you there. Hey guys, it's the social side. The revitalization of It's Consulting Time is back, and we're taking it back to the basics. That's B2TB. This curriculum-based season will shine a light on public education surrounding civics, community organizing, and trending topics. Guys, It's Consulting Time back to the basics is supporting the transformation of cultures and subcultures while building self-sufficiency and generating collective impact. Remember, purpose over popularity is always and will always be our motto. Tune in to It's Consulting Time back to the basics every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be on all platforms: YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and you can even catch a few clips on Instagram. It's Consulting Time back to the basics with your girl Lily Mae. See you there. Hello. And yo, I am so excited to be back with you for the third week of It's Consulting Time. Back to the basics. Guys, last week we talked a lot about the baby boomers. And so I kind of want to run it back a little bit just so we can kind of get into a discussion about that generation so we can set the tone for tonight. Now, one of the things I want to say first and foremost is simply this. It's consulting time back to the basics is not focusing in on one culture or subculture of people. It is my duty to bring you empirically based data. So, what that looks like is I've done research on the generations as a whole. However, I bring on special guests so that they can more or less give you a perspective from their vantage point. So, for all intents and purposes, the information that I give you will be empirically based. It's research. The majority of the information, with the exception of the things that I add in, will be fact based. Okay. So then after that, what I will do is I'll bring, our guests in and we'll really have an amazing conversation. So I just want you to know that for all intents and purposes, okay, it's consulting time back to the basics is not geared towards any particular culture or subculture of people. In order for you to truly understand what's going on in the world, you have to truly understand what has um, what has happened, historically in the world, so that you can then understand what's going on, going forward. And so I think that's really, really important, because I want you to understand the importance, guys, the importance of it's consulting time back to the basics, the importance of really understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because I think what's happening is we spend a lot of time pushing back, right? We spend a lot of time pushing back and not really honing in on the things that we really need to be talking about. And so, guys, I really just want you this evening, tune in and engage. If I can't ask you for anything else, I would love to have your engagement. It definitely means a lot to me. All right. So let's jump in and kind of recap last week and then we will come back. So last week we started off talking about the baby boomers and we ended with Gen X. Now, the baby boomers, that generation, right, or demographic of individuals, they remember when, JFK was elected, and they also remember that Martin Luther King brought his message of social justice to the world. Um, they knew people could bring about change because they witnessed the civil rights movement, right? They witnessed women's rights, and they also witnessed peaceful war protests. And so their idea of what the world was and could be was cemented by a certain sense of optimism. They were there for I Have a Dream. So baby boomers also were a little bit more team oriented. What that looks like, the birth of like parent teacher associations, little league, block parties, neighborhood wide, Secret Santa, all of those things, because they understand that consensus is a tool, right? And so I think it's important for us as we talk about these generations to understand those baby boomers, while they rejected a lot of things from the traditionalist generation, they still continue to maintain their team orientation and their service orientation. If you really wanted to define the day of the baby boomers, it would be ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, right? The other part of it is baby boomers also believe heavily in process, and relationships. So, they were interested in preserving relationships and getting results. And so they checked in, they networked, they understood more macro and micro needs in a more foundational way, right? Then out of the baby boomer generation, we had that second wave, which was like those Gen Xers, and that runs from like 1965 to 1981, 1980, 81, so to speak, right? Now, these individuals were more or less born during that women's rights era, right? Introduction of birth control, legalized abortion. We talked about that last week. And this generation gives off more cynical ways, right? They're used to being on their own from being latchkey kids. And this generation is the generation that truly began to question authority. Hold on to that, because they truly began to question authority, the Gen Xers, okay? All right. Informal, casual, very direct. Xers definitely preferred more startup entities, right? And the startups during their time would have been like your Googles, your Yahoos, your eBays and stuff, and where workers were a little bit more project based, more entrepreneurial. Now, Gen Xers truly utilize their rights and their period in politics to create a better life work balance. Now, what does that look like as we move in to talking about millennials? Now, guys, all right, so millennials. Um, that millennial wave is kind of interesting because, some sources will say it starts in 1980, but for all intents and purposes, we're going to focus on millennials being born from 1981 to 1994 to 96, right? And some of the major influences during the millennial time, was the expansion in technology. Technology expanded crazily, right? Natural disasters, violence, gangs, But one of the things that's interesting about the millennials, a lot of millennials were coddled, by their parents. Now, it's not to say, okay, and I want to make sure I drive this home. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with coddling your child. But I do believe you gotta be careful with the degree of coddling, right? Because what happens is, beginning with my generation, the millennials, you have a generation of people who lived through a couple of different things. Because let's just be real, technology wasn't necessarily booming at the beginning of the millennials existence, right? Technology kind of started to evolve, okay? And so interestingly, right now, your millennials would be your teachers and administrators that are like in their 30s, and under. Now, as students, millennials benefited from all the research in the educational field that started with the civil rights movement, moving through time, right? And millennials more or less grew up around adults that were more focused on how to meet their needs instructionally as well as culturally, right? So baby boomers, listen to the radio through a single speaker. Millennials, they about to watch TV, Nickelodeon, ABC Family, the Cartoon Network. I can remember, people had little signs on their car called, with baby on board and, IEPs and things of that nature. You really did not hear about IEPs and things of that nature until this generation kind of began to evolve more and more. Now, it's not to say that there weren't special education programs out there, but let's just be real. Research had to evolve for these things to truly take place. Okay. Now, when we think about millennials, we think about confidence, right? We think about them being assertive. Now, most millennials are concerned about the globe, right? And now I want to make sure I make sense when I say this. It's not to say that millennials are not self-absorbed, but they do have a tendency to be more concerned about global initiatives and what that looks like. Very realistic, very savvy, but also suffering ADD. I say it all the time. Listen, I'd be doing 50 million things. Something happened over here. I need to look over here, but I can come back to your conversation. And millennials are more or less classified as remote control kids, right? Kids that generally, once again, watch TV. But still, if we really had to describe millennials, it would be it's all about me, right? Okay. So, as with each generation, we have to talk about the waves. So, there are two waves of millennials. The first wave runs from like that 1981 to 1994ish, and those were the millennials that were mostly raised by baby boomers, and they like to be the center of attention. They have clear goals and still by their parents, but yeah, sometimes. Then you got this little bit of a second wave, and I say that because the second wave would only be 2 years, right? It would be like 95, 96. And these babies were definitely raised more or less by Gen Xers. They were emerged in full blown digital media. So that's why when we talk about millennials and then we get to talking about Gen Z, there is a period in time there where you had like a little, you got a couple of millennials, the younger ones, education is a must because they were taught survival instinct, but they were more raised by helicopter parents. They were raised by these overprotective parents who really are living through their kids, who are scared of everything, who just cannot function without their child, right? And so the interesting thing about that is it's necessary to understand what parent a millennial has in order to understand how to attract them in the workforce, you know what I'm saying, socially and things of that nature. Because realistically, even though millennials are pretty self-sufficient and they kind of do things on their own, millennials still are accustomed to praise, which is evident by social media, supervision, and structure. Okay. Now, this is why I said understanding the waves is important because a lot of research says that millennials didn't go out and play, kickball and make mud pies and stuff like that. But depending on where you grew up in the world, you probably did. I'm a millennial. I remember making mud pies. I remember doing, all of those things outside. I remember you couldn't come in into the street. I mean, you had to come in when the street lights came on. So, we had free play. However, as things transitioned and matriculated to that second wave, free play was out. It was out. Now, I will say millennials are a little bit more accustomed to structure and adult supervision, right? Accustomed and accepting are two different things. So you look up the definitions on your own time. The majority of millennials are very progressive, right? Global minded, open to diverse views, which explains a lot of the things that we're seeing in the world. More and more of our Gen Xers and millennials are in political office. So things are changing, whether we accept them or not, they're changing. And so that speaks to the fact that many millennials are accepting of others who are not like them, right? They kind of, millennials tend to shrug off differences and they shrug off a lot of the same differences that cause riots within the other generations. And so it's important to understand that with the globalized economy and constant communications that are connecting us all around the world, millennials generally view the world in the same way that boomers once viewed the world. And so we do believe that the world is large, but it is, navigable. We can navigate this large world. Millennials are able to multitask. So as we talk about this, and then we get to talking a little bit about Gen Zers, we're gonna really, get to some funny things because no matter what the most recent research says, and really to demystify human capacity to multitask, our generation can do it because I can remember watching TV, talking on the phone, doing homework, eating, doing all of that stuff at the same doggone time. And so that's a lot of the reason why the millennial generation, we suffer more with anxiety. Why? Because we believe that we can continue to do all of these things at the same doggone time. And realistically, education, holding down a job, having a social life, and all of those things at the same time, it is taxing and it is stressful. But guess what? As a result of that, a lot of times millennials are less prepared than the other generations to handle difficult situations. So what do millennials do? They shut down, they run away. Direct communication does not work with that second wave, definitely not. But that beginning wave, there's some deficits there, right? A lot of millennials are challenged by tasks that require independence, resilience, and, being resourceful. Many millennials just didn't have an option to fail. And because they didn't have an option to fail, now you have a generation of people who everything has to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, they don't feel accomplished. And for this reason, you have even more increasing suicide rates. You have even more levels of anxiety, more levels of drug use. There are so many things, guys, so many things that we see, all because of some of the things that occurred in generations prior that nobody wanted to talk about, nobody wanted to get a grip on. And now we are where we are. Okay. All right. So as we matriculate through and talk about millennials and we talk about, boomer parents, because boomer parents are generally the parents, of millennials. So let's rewind. Boomer parents are social advocates, and they inherited a lot of the previous generation's belief and worth ethics, with the exception that baby boomers were more vocal and opinionated. Well, guess what? They taught their millennial children the same belief system they were taught. However, millennials were allowed to have authority in the household and the digital era. But this is the issue with that. The issue is when you give children authority in the household, they go over to the schoolhouse and think they have that same authority. They go out in the world and do not respect authority because they are not taught all of the parameters around that authority. Now, millennial children that have Generation X parents. So Generation Xers have more of a survival mentality. Now we're talking about the latchkey kids. We're talking about the latchkey kids that grew up, in divorced families or single parent families, right? Generally speaking, Generation Xers are not joiners or activists, right? So these parents are generally teaching their millennial children that family is diverse. They're very active in their children's lives, almost like they're living through their children. They have to be involved in every single thing that their kid is doing. And they're generally teaching their children that they have the authority to do anything they want. So, what happens then? All right. So, we're going to talk, we're going to go back and we're going to talk about Gen Xers. We're going to talk about millennials, and we're going to talk about Gen Zers, because what's going to happen in essence is We're going to bring on a special guest. Like I said, last week we talked about Gen X. And understand the information that I'm presenting to you, it's going to be empirically based. It is not contingent upon how you grew up. It's contingent upon studies about the collective of the generation. So some things may be true to you, some things may not be true to you. But the idea is that I provide you with the information surrounding the area in which you grew up in, right? And then you will then be able to learn a little bit more about the generation you grew up in, thus understanding all the other topics and concepts that we're going to talk about for the rest of the season. All right. So let's just debrief with millennials. Digital media, school shootings, terrorist attacks, heightened AIDS, millennials typically grew up as children of divorce. They have this sense that, okay, we're gonna turn the world around from all the wrong that we've been seeing. Um Realistically, we were the first generation of kids that had like schedules of shit to do. Let's just be real. Now, many of the core values surrounding millennials, achievement, diversity, fun. The interesting thing is, do you know that of all the generations, the millennial generation, fun is like one of the top core values? That is going to translate into a lot when we begin to talk about Gen Zers and Gen Alpha. Now, generally, millennials have high morals. I don't know what the hell happened, but generally, millennials have high morals. But once again, I say, this research is collective, right? It is not individualized or targeted. Millennials have more street smarts. And believe it or not, now, I want you to understand something. Generally, millennials are the most educated generation. Understand, millennials are the most educated generation, but traditionalists were truly the most wise generation. That's just what it is. And we're gonna get into that as we bring out, our special guests. We're gonna talk about some of these things. And so I see one of my guests is in. So as soon as I see her turn her camera on, I am going to bring her out. But guys, feel free to engage. If you have questions, drop your generation in the comments. Let us know your thoughts on your generation, kind of how you grew up and what that looks like. We definitely, want to talk to you about what you got going on, how you got it going on, and what's going on. So let me bring out our special guest, and we are going to rock and roll. And let me set it up so you can see everybody. So what's going to happen, guys? We are going to remove our background so that everybody is visible and accounted for. All right. Okay, Miss Brenda, we can't see you. We gotta get some lights so we can see that smile, girl. You on mute, baby?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm in my office and it's like it's end of the day, so I'm just like decompressing. So I apologize.
Got it. No problem, no problem, no problem. So this evening, guys, we actually have our Gen X is back. And so you heard a little bit about the information I presented on millennials, what that looks like, and kind of why we're here. But guys, what we're gonna do is we're getting ready to hear from the ladies a little bit about some of the things that they experienced growing up within their respective generations, what that looks like, and what they want to say, to the generations coming behind them about how to navigate this world and some best practices for gaining traction in this world. So, Drea, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start off with you, and then Miss Brenda, you take the floor.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess a little bit about my upbringing. Um, I feel like my generation was the last of the outside kids, was the last of the playground kids, was the last of, double dutch basketball. In New York, we was big on handball and paddleball and things like that. And that doesn't happen anymore. Actually, like the handball courts are being taken out of New York. Um, there's no monkey bars. you know, like the monkey bars was being taken out for like the little jungle gyms, but like we used to be on those metal monkey bars where you could like climb to the top and fall to the bottom, and I guess they do it all in the name of safety. But I say everything in life needs a balance, and too much of one thing is not good on either side of the spectrum. You need a balance. So like the kids nowadays, like they're a little soft. Like I gotta say it, they're a little soft. You know, like you can't say nothing to them because they never experienced anybody saying nothing to them because everything done been so buffed and padded, and everything is an offense. Like it's just a lot. When I was growing up, you might not have liked them too much, but you might have had that aunt or that uncle that says some off stuff to you. But when you out in the street and somebody say something off to you, you be like, my uncle say worse than that. Like you gotta come better than that. And you built a tough skin. You know what I mean? Um, we knew the value of the depending on who your people were. That's what everything. But we knew the value of um holding back when adults was in the room. There's just certain things you didn't say, certain things you didn't do in front of adults. When you with your friends, you can let the filth floor and filth fly. But soon as an adult walk in the room, you gotta tighten that up. You know, that's one thing I got complimented on about my son, about my oldest son.
Mhm.
Um, he was with his friends walking down the street, and they was letting the filth fly, but it was just them. And then one of our church members, she said it. She said, when I was all the way down the block and nobody saw me, she said I heard it, but as soon as he saw me, he he told his friends, "Got to bring that down a notch." This is one of my church members. Got to
Wow.
cut it out till she cut the corner,
Wow. Amazing.
and
Amazing.
she heard him check them. Like, we're not doing that right now. This is one of my church members. We're not doing that.
So Drea, all right. So we're gonna take a pause right there. So a lot of times when we talk about Generation Y or the millennials, a lot of people will say, that generation, they are ambitious, but they are clueless, very impatient. Um,
Impatient.
they want to be individuals, yet they suffer from groupthink. They want to be like their peers, but it's like a unique little twist to it. Very informal with a short attention span. But the interesting thing is that millennials have been said to be a little bit more financially savvy. Like
Yes.
they mirror almost that traditionalist generation with making do with what they have. However, because they are entitled, sometimes they end up with more debt. And one of the things that when studying this generation, because it's so interesting, being a millennial, when you study the generations, you also have to study the parenting style of the generation, because there's a difference between a millennial that was raised by a baby boomer versus a millennial that's raised by a Gen Xer. It's gonna be totally different. You know what I'm
And
saying?
it all depends on, how, let's say the Gen Xer was raised by a baby boomer. It depends on how that happened. Because whatever happened there is what's going to come off to the millennial. You know what I'm saying? And just like with everything else, your kids are not going to pick up on everything, but there's a basic foundation that's going to be there. You know what I'm saying? But they go through experiences that we haven't experienced because they're growing up in a different time with more access. They have more access to more information. I think that's why they're more financially savvy. Because in my generation is when they started taking economics and things like that out of school. Economics, you know, learning how to cook they took all those things out of school.
The rise of the internet.
I
Yep.
didn't I didn't experience that. What I experienced was how to work. I had personal career development.
Hmm.
So in my senior year of high school, I went to school till about 11:15 in the morning, and then I went to work at the Brooklyn DA's office
Indeed.
for
Indeed.
the rest of the day.
So in the grand scheme of things, because things have been taken away from each generation and replaced by something else, there's always a disconnect from generation to generation to generation. So if the elder generation doesn't become well versed on what the new generation has replaced with whatever they lost in theirs, you're going to always have a disconnect and a gap. And
Mhm.
I think that plays into people understanding, responses to like Oklahoma City bombing. Because think about it, that was probably one of the biggest tragedies of our generation. The millennials, it was the Oklahoma City bombing, and then you had the O.J. Simpson trial. I can remember the death of Princess Diana, the Columbine shootings. You know what I'm saying? Now, 9/11 came more towards the latter teenage years for most millennials, and but still, you know those things definitely shape the way you view the world. It definitely shape the things that you see and how you talk to people and how you deal with people, because it's like, okay, this type of person is going to do that. That type of person might blow something up. And it's so interesting, guys, when we talk about the generations, when we go back, what? Baby boomers felt the same way about certain people. Baby boomers knew, traditionalists and baby boomers kind of knew, okay, let me tiptoe around this person because they might try to hang me from a tree. What's the difference between millennials after the Columbine shootings going to school, and as soon as they see a white kid in a trench coat, they like, oh hell no, we ready to fight. Because I know that's what we would like.
Mhm.
What's the difference between then we come to 9/11 and everybody was scared of anybody that looked like they were of Arabic descent? And I say all of these things to help you understand. There is a reason why. There is a reason why it is important to understand collective research on all generations before you really try to tackle more, community level issues. Because if you don't, you're going to get lost in the sauce. So it's definitely, we taking a macro approach, but that's why we have the ladies here to give you more of a micro approach. So Miss Brenda, come on out and talk to us a little bit about your viewpoint of growing up, as a Gen Xer, and kind of what that looked like.
Um, well, as far as my childhood growing up, I'm from the South, from South Carolina. Um, I'm also a part of that generation that rode bikes, rode through the neighborhood, knew people in the neighborhood. Older people in the neighborhood knew who we belonged to. Who you belong to, baby. Who are you? They knew that kind of stuff. So, we didn't know it, but they were looking out for us, making sure we were safe, when we were out playing and doing things like that. So I was definitely a part of that generation of be home before the street light comes on. That was definitely me growing up as a kid. Um, high school years, in the 90s, you mentioned, what was it, Oklahoma City. That was the first impactful thing that affected me as far as the country as a whole. My mom, like as far as beforehand on that level. So it kind of like went downhill. I hate to say it like that, but it kind of did speak. So yeah, my generation that growing up, all college, I was always taught to be respectful, and respect is subjective now, in my opinion, as far as like what Drea was saying earlier about younger generation of kids, like the things that we didn't even think about saying to our parents because we knew we would from a backhand or being rectified by our grandmother or whomever, right. Basically that's what will happen to us. But with this generation, they're very vocal. Like my daughter, she's very vocal, but she's also respectful because of how she was raised. She was raised by two Generation Xers, and she's fortunate to have grandparents in her life, aunts and uncles who are also baby boomers, and things like that. So she's got a wealth of inspiration in her family. But again, she is still what she's a Gen Zer. So she's still very vocal. She speaks her mind. I always tell her to not be disrespectful at all as far as speaking to elders because that's how I was raised. So of course I'm going to instill that in my only child. Um, but yeah, that and it's so funny that with Drea being from up top and me being from the south, we were kind of raised very similar, very similar. As far as my daughter, like I said, I try to instill those things in her. I don't want her to be the best she can possibly be. But that generation, I have to agree, is a little soft. You know, you say something too harsh to them, they fall out. Child, they can't take it. The nerves, heart palpitations carrying on. It's like okay. I remember going through this at that age in college, same scenario, same situation, and they're like, I handled it a whole lot better. So it's like I'm trying to instill in her that, it builds courage and it builds character when you go through things. And also never forget your faith because whatever you're dealing with, God's gonna carry you through it. So
Wow, it's interesting that you say, that millennial generation is soft. I definitely will agree 100%. And it's so interesting because as a millennial, being raised three generations removed made life look different, right? So, where, most millennials grew up in more blended, merged families, or we talked about, divorced and single, parent homes, growing up in a different setting, in a more traditional nuclear setting, you heard more about, putting away and family and community and paying your dues and working hard, and you understood respect and authority in terms of submission, right? But now, when you say submission in this climate, it's something negative. But like you said, as
right,
I learned submission, submission was a strength. Submission was, respecting that authority. It didn't mean that you bowed down, but it meant that you humble yourself, right? So
exactly.
kids now aren't taught submission in terms of humility, right? It's like, oh, I'm not doing that, how, and then it's a very a strong sense of entitlement with the millennial generation. And once again,
Hmm.
what happened though, there was a strong sense of entitlement with Gen X's as well. But why? It came from that relinquishing of power from the baby boomers. Every
Hmm.
generation wanted to release something from the previous generation. So the baby boomers didn't want to be as strict on their kids as the traditionalists. And then the Gen X's didn't want to be as strict on their kids as the millennials. And hell, these millennials and these Gen Zers. But the interesting thing is, it's reversing. We're making our way back because Gen Z generally is running from like 1996, 97 to 2012, but Gen Alpha are those kids that started to be born in 2013, right? Or so. And think about it, those kids are 9 and 10 now. Those
Mm-hmm.
kids are a hell of a lot more hard than millennials were as children and Gen Zers. These little kids, they will tell you what's on their mind. And so, my question for y'all is, what do you think is happening that these Gen Alphas, and it's so interesting that this new generation of babies that's coming are called Gen Alpha because we know Alpha is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting that they are starting to exhibit more mannerisms of almost a mixture of the traditionalists and the baby boomers because these Gen Alphas, they really care about their friends. They're very concerned, they're very aware without the chip on their shoulder. So, what do you think is happening that this new generation of babies really might end up being the true leaders of the future for real?
It feels
Well,
almost
one of the
biblical.
things,
Go ahead.
and I was gonna say
Go ahead, Dre.
one of the things that I feel like is happening is that, um, at least for our community, we starting to see things like, okay, we need to look out for ourselves. I think we're starting to bring back that fellow man thing because there's so much happening to us in our community from other communities. And then we see how, you know, such and such, that group, they stick together, they get more done. That group, they stick together, they get more done because they have more access to information that we didn't have access to. You know what I'm saying? We had access to what was immediately around us, but the generations after us got access to what's going on around the world. And they get to see, like, it started off with music telling what was happening in different parts of the world, but now they get to see it regularly
That technology. That's
in
so true.
technology.
I was gonna say so that is true because they definitely, but they love that instant gratification, and it's so funny. The Gen
Right.
Zers,
It's like a gift and a curse, the technology thing.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Oh my God. Because I think what's happening too with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, Gen Z, they're independent, but they lack the community orientation because they asses really grew up with the technology. Like technology, y'all had a little bit, we had a good amount, but Gen Zers, everything, World Wide Web,
Everything.
Everything.
everything. Because World Wide
Completely.
Web became available after 1991. Hell, in 1991,
Exactly.
I was 6. So
Right.
you're right. It's a blessing and a curse. But go ahead, Brenda.
Oh yeah, I was just saying it feels almost biblical. Like it's like a rebirth of a nation, so to speak. But yeah, I always think about things that my grandparents or parents would say growing up, like this baby been here before. Because the babies are so wise, like they are so vocal and so wise. And it's like, how can this little body empower this much wisdom at such an early age? So it's like, imagine how amazing they're going to be when they reach 18 and beyond, you know? So yeah, that's why I feel like it's a rebirth of the nation. And I feel like it's an order. It's in order. I don't know how else to elaborate on that. It's just that it's a rebirth of the nation, of the world.
I'm just um I look at, and I know Brenda, you haven't seen them, but Drea seen them. I think about my Tuda and my Jayla, my niece and nephew.
Hmm.
And Tuda is 6. That little ninja the size of a 12-year-old. And Jayla 5, and she the size of a 12-year-old. But it's so interesting to me that when Tudor was around 2 or 3 and his nana, my mom would have to go to the hospital or something, that child would say stuff like, Nana, you take your medicine? No, you don't take medicine. Nana, you take your medicine. And I just think about that, like, what children really would be thinking about that for real?
Well, people,
Mhm.
one thing I would say about like earlier generations is I think they took for granted what kids know. And that was what started the following generation to allow their kids to speak more, because kids know more than what you think they do. They
Mhm.
listen, and their
They're
brain
observant.
is absorbing at a faster rate.
Mhm.
Between birth and 5 years old, they absorb the most.
True.
They absorb the
True.
most. That's when they're little sponges. That's why they say if you want to teach your child another language, you start it in those years.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
agree.
That's where they learn the most. So you think she's not paying attention when Nana is on the phone or Nana is talking with somebody about, oh, I missed my medication, or did you take your medication to the they heard that. So
Baby,
now Nana's in
everything.
the hospital. Did you take your medicine?
Yep.
Because they heard that
Mhm.
conversation. They heard that conversation.
Indeed.
This is back in the days we wasn't allowed to say anything, so it was like
Oh
we would
no.
just sit there and one
You might have saw
and just
it.
look and think it. Because I was one of those kids that will just look
Right.
at things and think it. You know what I mean? Like it'll be going all through
Mhm.
my head, and then somebody would say something, and I'm thinking to myself, yup, because I heard the other day when they was talking yup. And so I remember being that kid. You know what I mean? Kids
Mhm.
know more than you think.
Indeed.
So, like when I became a parent, I tried to talk to my kids more, and people came at me for that. Oh, you give your kids too much say, and what affects me affects them, especially being a single parent. So what's coming down through me is gonna affect them, and I want to know their opinion.
Indeed.
Mhm.
I
Indeed.
want to know
Mhm.
their opinion.
Indeed.
I
Ooh.
talk to my kids because that's why when they got of school age, especially Isaiah when he got to high school, because he 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 came out to me with his sexuality when he was 11. So
Wow.
I had to have serious conversations with this boy at an early age.
Yep. You did. You
I
did.
had to really make sure that I know my child, because I don't want anybody to just, and this is regardless of his sexuality or anything, but I had to let him know what was going to be coming at him
Yeah.
because of it. Because
Yeah.
not only are you a black man in America, but now you're a gay black man in America. So that
Yep.
just
Exactly.
compounds
Yep.
with a whole nother layer. Try to prepare them for people who are going to come at you, and it's going to seem like it's for no reason.
Indeed. Indeed. Indeed.
People are going to say things to you. People are going to try to do things to you. And this and so when he had issues in school because of it, because another student coming after him because of it, or this, that, and the other, and the school called me like, oh, Isaiah's just wilding out. No, he not. No, he not. He didn't just come into school today and say, I'm just pick that kid and I'm gonna fight.
Indeed.
We need to get the background because my child don't walk into no other place and get into a fight, but he keeps getting into fights here.
Right.
Something's happening here.
Mm,
I seen other parents, they just wild out on their kid and this and you have to know your kid.
Mhm.
that part. Did you just,
And
what,
that means
Chris? That
talking
part.
to them. That
That
means
part.
talking to them and seeing how they
Mhm.
think. That's the only way you're going to,
Exactly.
just telling them to do as I say is not going to give you an insight on how they think.
Oh, absolutely not. That generation does not go for that at all.
It does not work.
At
It does
all.
not work.
Because they
No.
going to do. They going to do
No.
the opposite of what you say do. And
Exactly.
And
it's crazy because I think that, and that would, if you really think about it, I think that's all kids. Don't touch the stove. Why? Oh, you're not gonna
Why?
tell me why? Well, let me go touch it and find out.
Right. So why
So
not
yeah,
tell them why?
absolutely.
And like I said, because everybody think different. They have different um things that's hitting their sensors than we had when we was their age. Some
Hmm.
things are simpler, and yeah, you could give advice on it, but other things they got different experiences. So you got to see how
Yes.
they think. And like Isaiah been with me the longest. I got the most stories about Isaiah, right? So that's my
Sure.
25-year-old. We grew up learning each other together.
Right.
True.
You know what
Okay.
I'm
Right.
saying? Like we grew up
Yep.
together.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
We
Yep.
been he been through the struggle. By time my youngest came around, like I was more established. He had a different parent than what Isaiah had. Isaiah had a struggle parent. Isaiah
Hello.
had the parent who sometimes we had to mix Campbell soup with rice to make a dinner. You know what I'm saying? That's the
You
parent
just had
that
a different.
Isaiah
It was a
had.
different walk. It
Isaiah
was a
had the
different walk at that
projects.
time.
Right. Isaiah had the projects. Kevin knows nothing about the projects. Kevin lived in a house his whole life. You know what I'm saying? Completely different. Kevin was born into a
Hmm.
marriage. The
Got you.
marriage didn't last, but he was born into one. So two different experiences. So like with Isaiah about learning how they think, right? He called me one night and he was coming from Brooklyn. We was living in Queens at this point. He was coming from Brooklyn. The bus was taking too long to come. He said, "Ma, can you come and get me?" So I was like, "Okay, where you at?" He was like, "I'm on 116 by the bus stop, by the gas station." I was like, "All right." Me, my youngest son Kevin, and my mom, we was about to go out somewhere anyway. So we was like, "Okay, we'll just pick him up along the way." We go to 116th by the gas station, no Isaiah. And my mom was like, "Where's this boy at? You think somebody snatched him?" Like she's thinking all these things.
Oh my
I was like,
God.
"Mom,
Mhm.
go to the other side of the block." She was like, "But he said 116th in the gas station." I was like, "Mom, I just got a feeling. Just go to the other side of the block." I was like, on the other side of the block is where he would catch the bus to come down to the house. I just have a feeling that he walked over there and just didn't say nothing. And sure enough, when we went to the other side of the block, my child was standing there at the bus stop.
Oh my God.
And she was like, "How did you know he was over here?" I don't know. I just know his way of thinking. So he's probably thinking, if the bus come before they come, I'll just grab the bus and then call them that and say I hopped on the bus. You know what I'm saying? You just gotta know how your child
Indeed.
thinks.
Indeed. Indeed. Let's address this real quick.
Exactly.
'Cause, let's address this. Shout out to, and I hope I don't butcher your name, Sarah Wattlism. Y'all should be friends with them. Now, I'm gonna answer this because first and foremost, I'm not a parent. Um, However, I will say this. I personally disagree with being a quote friend to your child before they get old enough to understand boundaries. Because I know that my mother was my best friend when I became an adult, but when I was a child, she was my mama. And no, period. However, as we got
Period.
older, we did transition into an adult to adult mother daughter relationship versus a parent child mother daughter
Hmm.
relationship. I do think that, and there are different parenting styles, and believe it or not, guys, that's one of the things that we're going to go through as we get towards the spring, right? We're going to talk about parenting
Hmm.
styles, but I think that um, being negligent, more to speak, and being, because you want to be friends and you want your child to like you, so you let your child do whatever they want to do and run your household. I think that's how, I hate to say this, and I'm sorry if it triggers somebody, but that's how your kid get messed up in the streets by the police. I'm just gonna keep it real because they think that everybody is their friend and they don't have to respect or answer to anybody because the main authority figure is letting them run them because they want to be friends. Moms, y'all responses.
Well, I can tell
I
you. I can tell you off the bat, 100%. Nope. My daughter is my daughter. We have a beautiful, wonderful, evolving relationship that I can see moving towards an amazing friendship. She went off to college 2 years ago. So that Christmas when she came home, she was telling me that she was telling her friends about me, and that like my mom is my best friend. I can tell my mom and talk to my mom about anything. She doesn't judge me. She listens to me. She gives me sound advice, and she's always there for me. Now listen, I ain't got but one. Okay, God didn't give me but one. And when I tell you that is my heartbeat, that is my heart and soul. But she understands boundaries. She understands that she's evolving into a young adult because she'll be 21 this year. I am still your mother. Okay? But no, I agree with you 100% on that, Lila. That's how I was brought up too. No, your mom is not your friend. Now, when you become an adult, that's different. But in my opinion, the child rearing years are still going because even though she's out of the home right now, she's still in college, so she still ain't grown.
You know what, Brenda and Dre, I'm gonna come to you, but Brenda, I want you to speak to something if you can,
Hmm.
cause we always, and guys, y'all know I go against the grain. We always talking about how these boys need their daddies, but Brenda, can you speak to the importance of a girl having her dad? I don't want to speak to it because I think everybody know where I stand because I'm a whole daddy's girl. So I don't want to speak to it. Can you speak to that though?
Woo! Man, wow. The fact that you even asked me that is so that's mind blowing. My daughter grew up in a two-parent household. My now ex-husband and I were together. We split her senior year in high school. Fortunately, he dropped the ball a whole lot when he left the household. Him not being present in the household like he was from birth up to the age of 17 made a big impact on her to the point where she saw things here and there in our relationship growing up. To She came to me one day and told me that she basically was bisexual. She said, and it's really mainly she's been dating girls for the past few years because she said it's just something about the men and that she saw growing up in her life, mainly her father. She did not like the way her father treated her mother, but she saw who I was as a person that was open and loving and warm and treated him with respect even when he did not deserve it. So with all that going on, she still was respectful. She still was, she never talked back or was disrespectful to her father, and she still isn't. But the fact that he was not present during and I mean senior year in high school, senior year, and he comes from an environment where okay, well you graduate high school, you're grown now. No, no, she's not. Now she's got to go out of our home or out of the home that we raised her in, and we got to pray that she listens to the stuff we told her. You know, and the communication failed. There was a lack of communication, just horrible communication on his part. I mean, he's trying to make up for it now, but I'm no longer privy to that information because I don't have to be because she's old enough now so she can communicate with her father on her own. But it's definitely a big disconnect. Girls need their dads. Girls need their dads to show them what it is like, how you should be treated as a woman. Your dad should be your first love. My daddy was my first love. He loved my mom until he left this earth. And he gave me an example of what a strong man should look like and what a strong man does and provides for not only his queen, but his children. And on top of that, my daddy raised some of my siblings and they weren't his biological kids. So when I tell you
Yep. Yep.
My daddy
Yep.
was a daddy. You hear me?
Woo!
So it is vital. It's vital. It's vital so you can hold your head up high as a queen when you're an adult and you know what your boundaries are. You don't even have to voice them because men are not gonna approach you because they're gonna see it all over you. They're gonna see, oh no, I can't play with her. So let me go on somewhere else. So it's vital, very highly important. Absolutely.
Woo.
I would not be the woman I am because of that. And you know what? Hold
Drea in
on.
the classroom.
I
Drea in
just
the classroom. She can't wait. She got the
this
answer.
was hold on, okay. I'm coming, sis. I'm coming. One more story. Okay, I'll make it quick. Um, my boyfriend that I've been dating for the past 3 years, right? Initially, he beat himself up for his divorce. He's been divorced for like 7 8 years now. So we had a conversation about me meeting her not too long about a year 2 years ago now. We had a conversation and I was like, well, even though you and your ex-wife were cordial, and this is a young lady, like when they divorced, she was like 7 or 8. So and she's 14 now. So my thing is, I asked him, I said, you don't think that she needs to see you in a loving relationship with someone, with your girlfriend or with the woman that you're with, so she can know what that feels like? Knows is daddy over here, mama over here. I don't know what her relationship is like with, his ex. But as her daddy, as her father, she needs to see you loving who you're with. Because that's going to make an impact on her, especially now she's a freshman in high school. I mean, these are critical years right here. So yeah, I'm done. I just wanted to add that in. That's why it was so funny you asked me that because all of that I have been dealing with all that the past year and a half or so.
And yes, and so Drea, I got you. So and I think I'm glad you spoke your piece. I'm glad you spoke from the vantage point of being a divorced parent and from being a daughter. Because I think that's important because one of the things, and ladies under the sound of my voice, heal. Just because you're not with your child's father, stop making these men out to be the enemy because a lot of times it's not the man, it's you. You are hurt internally and you don't know how to deal with it, and you continue to view them as the person that hurt you. A lot of men are not meant for you. Stop getting in relationship with these men that's not meant for you. Then get mad when they do better with somebody else. I was with the same person for 12 years. He ended up marrying somebody else. That is great. Why? Because I know I was the problem. Why? Because I was a daddy's girl too. And if you ain't do it the way Bo Jones doing it, you won't doing it right. But I prayed for my
Come on,
daddy.
bro. Come
That's
on,
right.
General.
I prayed for my daddy. And God sent me my daddy in the form of a fiance. So listen, but you gotta heal inside first. But we're gonna talk about that on another.
Absolutely.
So go ahead, Drea. Go ahead, girl.
Okay, because I'm sitting here busting at the seams. I'm sitting here busting at the seams. And I know I'm a boy mom, but I am a daughter that was raised without a daddy. I was not in a two-family home. I didn't have a daddy that act right. I had no my examples of the traditional man was my uncles, and they had their flaws. You know what I'm saying? They had their flaws that I just couldn't see myself dealing with as my aunts and them dealt with. And then the couple of people that I did see my mom, which was my dad coming in and out, taking advantage, using her. He didn't physically abuse her, he didn't verbally abuse her, but how he acted was definitely mentally abusive. You pop in, you doing good for a few months, and then literally, like he was that go to the store daddy. Like I'm going to the store, and then you don't see him for months or years. And then he popped back up, like, hey, like everybody's supposed to be like, hey, like, nigga, you went out for cigarettes 2 years ago.
Right.
To the point where when I turned 19 and he came in for a spell, did one of those store runs, like literally, did one of those store runs, didn't come back, right? All his stuff in the house. When I tell you, like, because he was doing good for so long, it was almost like we refused to believe that he was on his shenanigans again. You know what I mean? So we're calling morgues, we're hospitals, the jailhouse, because he's been arrested before, all kind of things, trying to find this man, can't find him. I'm walking through the projects. I'm cutting through, going to my friend's house, right? And I see one of our neighbor's sons who knew my whole family even before I was born. Like his family and my family was like this even before I was born. And I haven't seen him for a while because he had left. His mom and dad still lived in the building, but he had left. You know, he's grown, got his own life or whatever. He walking through. I'm like, "Hey, David, how you doing?" He's like, "Hey," and we talking. He's like, "Yeah, I just saw your dad and his girlfriend at a barbecue 2 weeks ago." Er, I haven't seen my dad in 4 months. What are you talking about? He was like, "Yeah, him and his girlfriend Geneva, they live, on Buffalo and Eastern Parkway." Oh, really? No. Okay. Grabbed all his stuff. I went upstairs. I said, "Ma, I know where Daddy at. We gonna find him." Grabbed all his stuff. I was like, "He living with some chick named Geneva, and we gonna end this right now."
Mm.
Grabbed all his stuff, drove up there. I was like, "I'm just gonna drive and just see if we see him," because I didn't have an apartment. I didn't have a building. I just knew that corner. And let me tell you how good God is. That man was sitting outside on a lawn chair in front of the building with the other chick's kids running around him.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that was
Pulled
God.
right up on him, popped the trunk, started putting his stuff on the curb, and
Wait a
he,
minute. Hold up. Hold up. Because, girl, when you said pop the trunk, all I could think about is Bone Crusher
I ain't
with
never
the
seen it.
F9 in the trunk.
No, he's still my daddy. I couldn't pop the trunk in that way. He's still my daddy. But I had his stuff in the trunk.
Drea, pause. Pause. Say what you said one more time.
He's still my daddy.
If y'all don't hear, ladies, women, women and men, if y'all don't hear nothing else I say, anything else I say, y'all know I ain't got to be grammatically correct because this is consulting time and we raw. Understand, I don't care how much you don't like your baby daddy or baby mama. You laid down with them, so you like something about them when you laid with them. Understand, that
Hello.
is still their mama or that is still their daddy. I have this conversation all the time. It's no secret, and the world know I really don't care for the mother of my nieces and nephews. But I will always say that's still their mama. And
And
if
let me tell
they're
you
involved
something.
in
Exactly.
something that I'm involved in, I'm gonna always attempt to,
To include.
acknowledge her and yeah. I think that and you know, Brenda, you don't know, but Drea, no. I
I
but
know.
but I understand that. And the reason I understand that is because I have so many guy friends that are suffering because they cannot see their kids because of bitter women who will not let them have a relationship with their kid because they don't want them.
Right. And my mom could have easily been one of those. Who, like, the way that she handled my daddy was a gift and a curse. It was a gift because she never spoke bad about him. She would stop people from speaking bad about him, even though she had every reason to talk bad about him. She had every reason. Hell, I had a few reasons. I just couldn't see it because that was daddy, and when I was younger, I just couldn't see it. But when I got old enough, when I turned 19 and I dropped that stuff on the curb, I told him, I said, look, we've been doing this for a long time. This back and forth and this, that, other. And me personally, I can't do it with you no more. Yes, you are my father, but you don't have to worry about me. I am 19 years old. The job is done. Mommy did her thing, and I'm cool. You don't have to worry about trying to come over. You don't have to worry about trying to call. You don't have to worry about trying to do any of that. I'm good because I could do without all of this back and forth that you're giving me. And mentally on that day, I really tapped out. Whatever he gave me in that relationship was cool for that day. But mentally, I tapped out, kind of out of sight, out of mind. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do the back and forth anymore. Now the gift and the curse thing, like I said, my mom, she wouldn't talk bad about him. Like this my father was a straight up crackhead my whole childhood. I was an adult when he stopped using drugs. So my whole childhood, my dad was a straight crackhead. Stole my jewelry, came to my house, stole stuff from me, stole stuff from my mom to sell or to pay off crack debts and this, that, and the third. So I do not have a healthy way of dealing with the opposite sex. I don't. I'm realizing that now, but I don't. I come off too aggressive, maybe too masculine, too strong. Um, and that's partially because there's just certain things I'm not trying to have. I saw how like my uncle would talk to my aunt and belittle her and things like that in front of the family. Yeah, we're not doing that. I, how my dad with the in and out, and my mom still always accepting him. Like even my dad was in his 50s when he got his first apartment. My mom furnished that entire apartment. My mom furnished that entire apartment. And then I had to go over there and show him how to pay bills because he never had to pay bills before because he always lived off of a woman. Like it's just it's a weird power play because I've it's just weird. So
Mm, okay.
and this is why I'm single now because I have to take the time to figure this out or I'm going to keep going in the same circles that I've been going in that's just not working.
Okay, guys. All right, guys, for real, for real. So this is what's up. We already over time. I promised we was gonna go an hour, but this is real, and this conversation is going to continue. Um, it's consulting time. Back to the Basics was created, developed, cultivated to support individuals with building self sufficiency, but it's necessary, right? To support you with information and education to help you transform your culture and subcultures while generating collective impact. Guys, this been heavy tonight. These ladies have been so vulnerable and so raw with you, and they have kept it so freaking real with you tonight. Um, Thank you for the engagement in the comments. We're gonna run it back next week. We will have Mr. Jimmy Littles. He will be our special guest. But ladies, we're gonna run it back. So if y'all in for it, definitely be back with me next Tuesday, and we'll have a man. So what's gonna happen is it's gonna be three ladies and a man, and we're gonna see if he can take on us. But really,
Uh-huh.
really, really, guys, if anything has been said tonight that you can, feel supported, please, by all means, reach out to us. We're here. Drea Nicole, Brenda Renee, and your girl Lily Mae. It's been real, guys. It's consulting time. Back to the basics. We're leaving it here because we're coming back next week. Have a great evening, ladies and gentlemen.